So you're looking for a pro controller that's both simple but has advanced functionality and at a low price. At only $70, we've got the GuliKit TT Max, which actually has way more features than I was expecting at this price point, including back paddles, but also a removable D-pad. But is it any good for fighting games? Let's find out. All right, I've got Street Fighter 6 booted up here, and I want to point out that no one ever said that this is supposed to be a fighting game controller, but on this channel, that's what I'm mostly interested in. There are a large number of features on this controller, and I am going to go through all of them, but I'm personally most interested in this D-pad, especially because you can remove it and actually put on a different one that looks a bit more like a traditional D-pad. Also want to point out at the start of this video that this was sent to me for the purposes of making this video. I haven't been instructed to say anything specific about it. I don't have to send it back at the end, and of course, all opinions are my own. So we're going to talk about the D-pad, of course, very soon, but let me just go through all the main features in case you're looking at this as a non-fighting game controller as well. First of all, you can see it's a very nice looking controller. In addition to RGB and a nice little light here, it has a nice little shimmer that if you've got little lights in your room, it will reflect them in a nice, cool way. And this is not a color that I see that often. Now, the shape of the controller, the design of this thing, is a lot like an Xbox style controller. It encourages your hand to kind of wrap around it like this. And I assume it's because most people playing on Xbox are playing FPS games like Call of Duty, and makes your fingers really want to fall onto these triggers down here, which is usually a good thing. Personally, for fighting games, I don't love it because I feel like I have to bring my fingers over here to the tips of these shoulder bumpers. I actually prefer just PlayStation style where they're just like buttons, but these bumpers are kind of the Xbox style, and they've gone for that with this controller. So if you don't like having your fingers completely wrapped around like this, maybe this is already not the design that you'll like. But if you don't mind the Xbox shape, then this is kind of pretty standard for that. You've got the analog sticks, the D-pad, and the buttons. Now, what's different to an Xbox controller is that you have the PlayStation layout. So this is already getting kind of strange because this is kind of marketed as a PC, iOS, Android, Switch 2 controller. And it doesn't really have the look of a Switch controller because this actually has the PlayStation layout where both of the analog sticks are down here and the D-pad and the buttons are up here. Personally, I'm grateful because I like for fighting games to have the D-pad up here in the upper position. So it makes it much easier for me to do all of my execution. So already, not even thinking about whether this is a good D-pad or not, whether it skips neutral down or anything like that, it's already just in a really good position. So I like it for that. Then there's the fact that you just have these analog sticks down here. What you can actually do is you can pull both of these sticks off. And if you have a quick look here, there is a screw hole and it comes with a dedicated teeny tiny screwdriver, so try not to lose this. And you can actually tighten these sticks. They wrote in the website that there are 4,000 levels of tension. They're not actually in discrete levels. It's just a screw. So basically you can turn this screw like maybe 3 or 4 revolutions. That's how much leeway you have. Just screw this all the way in. You're just gonna have to take my word for it that it is much tougher. It has much more resistance when trying to push this stick now, which is nice because if you're in a game like Forza and you're trying to have very smooth turns as you go around the corners, just pulling very, very slowly over here, having a lot more tension on the stick feels completely different. And this is way more customizability than I would expect for a controller at the $70 price range. Now, if it was $70 and it only had this feature, then I would kind of understand. But in addition to the tensioning that you can do on either of these analog sticks, you also have on the back of the controller 4 back paddles, which is amazing. And these are not just regular back paddles. You can remove these really easily. Watch, if I just pull on these, they come right off. That could be a bad thing, I suppose, if you're worried about them coming off. But if you're using them as usual, you're not like pulling them at a weird angle. They're incredibly easy to use, but they don't fall off. What I actually do is I remove these two because I keep pressing them by accident, which is great. Again, if you're thinking of this as a fighting game controller, it's great because I like to have all my button controls on the right and have my left hand only focus on directional movement. So just to demonstrate, instead of having parry on L1 and drive impact on L2, I've set these buttons to also be L1 and L2, which means that I can do all of my parry and drive rush stuff like this using the button over here. So just forward, parry, and that's going to be drive rush, or if I just press this back pedal, I do drive impact. Now that does lead me on to one small disadvantage, and it's the fact that you cannot actually remap L3 or R3 to one of these back pedals, which is kind of a shame. And also, I don't really understand how I would unmap these buttons. You just press this cog and the back paddle, and then when you press a button like light punch, then when you press the back paddle again, it will also do that button, which means that you now have 2 of that button. So in tournaments, not really sure if I'm able to use this function, because you can't usually have punch on a button here and have punch on a button over here as well. Sometimes the rules change, so double check on tournament rules that you're, for whatever tournament you're going to. But if I'm just playing at home, no one's going to know or care what shortcuts I've got set up. So I've got my button here and my button here for drive rush and drive impact. Now, like a lot of pro controllers these days, if you pull a little switch over here, you can change this from being a trigger to being just a simple micro-switched button, and it does have a little click. Now we should talk about this D-pad, because obviously for fighting games, that's the most important part. But what's also very cool about this D-pad is that you can remove this and put on this D-pad instead. Now, in theory, because it's got these ridges on here, it's even better for fighting games, because now you know exactly what you've pressed, even if you can't really feel that tactile bump, which you do feel a bit of a tactile bump. And it does help, but the thing is, the plastic on this D-pad is quite tough. I don't think it's the hardest plastic on earth, but it's definitely not soft. And I found that while I was testing this controller, it just, like, even after only 10 minutes, I was like, I'm starting to feel blisters on my thumb. I don't like the feel of that. So I actually went back to the circular shaped one, and I had no issues. Yes, it is nicer on this D-pad because you know exactly what direction you're pressing on, but as long as you're not like rotating your palm around crazily, you can pretty much know exactly what direction you're pressing. So personally, I had no issues using the circular D-pad, and actually I really like it. I have had no issues doing my basic combos or anything like that, doing my dragon punches, doing my Tatsumaki Senpu Kyakus. Okay, I've switched to Under Night In-Birth, and I usually use this game just to test a few specific things. First of all, we want to see if it just works for regular combo stuff. I do find that it actually is easier using this D-shaped, with the ridged shaped D-pad. The thing is, then you're dealing with the fact that it is that hard plastic again, and it does kind of hurt over time. The other thing I like to test in this game is whether I can go from crouching forward to crouching back without skipping the neutral down input. Now, as you can see, if I do try quite hard, I actually can skip the down input, which makes it a problem in this game, because I need to go like crouching down forward C into down, down, back, back. And if I don't get the down input, it ends up skipping the special input, and I just get this weird kind of punch instead. Now, if I'm careful, it doesn't skip the down input. It feels like the harder you push down on it, the more likely you are to like skip that down input. The thing is, I don't think there's really a controller that's completely immune to this. It's also to do with the speed that you do it. If you go from like down forward to down back really fast, you can get it to like skip the down input. And I don't fully know what the reason for it is, but if you look at this D-pad, you can see it's a little bit different to something we see in a lot of other D-pads, where the up, down, and left and right separate buttons underneath here are concealed. All we can really see is this stem, which means what we're using here is a plastic stem, which is like manipulating some mechanism down here, which is pushing the 4 cardinal directions separately. So would it be my first choice for fighting games? Maybe not, just because of the neutral down skip. But then again, I think all controllers do kind of experience this to some extent. It doesn't skip it every time, but it skips it enough times that it wouldn't be my first choice. Alright, so I've got Forza Horizon 6 booted up just to show you that this can do things that are not fighting games only. And I wanted to show you that I've got my analog throttle control. It's a Hall effect sensor. On this controller, it's got both. So it's TMR, which I believe is tunnel magneto-resistant. It just means it's a technology that will be resistant to stick drift over time, which is obviously an issue that makes you have to spend money and buy a whole new controller in the future. So that shouldn't be a problem on this controller, because we've got TMR sticks on the analog sticks, and I'm also using it at full resistance, which I really like for a game like this, where I want to have as much control as possible. It's very easy to press still. It's not like a ton of resistance, but having just enough resistance on here just makes it a little bit easier to have nuance when I'm trying to drift carefully. And also, if you want to, you can use the right analog stick to change the camera angle. I don't really need resistance on the right stick, but you can have high resistance on both or low resistance on both. You just use this little screwdriver tool. There really isn't anything better than just cruising around Tokyo and pretending that you live in Japan. And I actually do live in Japan, so I don't know why I don't just do this in real life. Oh yeah, because it would be way too dangerous. All of this in a controller which, in my opinion, still comes in under the price that you would expect to pay for a Pro controller. And I'm not talking just like the standard Nintendo Switch Pro controller. I'm talking about a Pro controller that actually has back buttons, TMR sticks, and Hall effect triggers and all that. Not to mention, in addition to that, you've also got these changeable D-pads. Now, one thing I haven't shown you yet, because I've been using it this whole time, I've just unplugged it from my computer. This is the Hyperlink Generation 2 wireless controller adapter, and I've been using this to wirelessly connect to the computer. Apparently this is very low latency, supposedly as low latency as actually being plugged into the computer. I tried it in fighting games with the regular cable and using this wireless adapter, and I couldn't really tell the difference. Alright, last but not least, I did want to show you the website because it does have a setup tool, but you cannot use it with the TT Max as of yet. If you scroll down here, it actually says it only supports these controllers and we do not have access to the TT yet, but there is also a button tester that does seem to work. So as long as you're plugged into the computer, or I believe if you're on the wireless adapter as well, it does show you things that you're doing on the controller. You can test all these buttons. The reason I wanted the software was I wanted a way to switch off and deactivate L1 and L2 so that I could put L1 and L2 on the back buttons and then have a tournament legal controller, but that does not seem to be a thing yet. So there's a feature on this controller which I have not found a use for yet. Autopilot gaming button. You press it and it just plays the game for you, or rather it plays back a recording of stuff that you can do. Basically, it's a macro, and I have not found any particular use for it. So at least there is a software way to do this, and then you can export it as an APG file, and it does say that it's compatible with the TT series. This is the USB cable it comes with, and you can see it's kind of bent because when it first arrived, it was like wrapped up like this. I've never seen a flat USB-C cable, first of all, because there's not really a whole need for a flat USB-C cable unless you're hiding your USB cables underneath your carpet. But it arrived like this, which means that when you first pull it out, it just has these weird wrinkles in it and also just feels kind of flimsy, even though it probably isn't actually flimsy. But for a USB-C cable, I'm just not used to having a flat one. And a couple more things I want to show you. It does have a Switch layout. I actually thought maybe these would be clicky buttons and these could be like the regular standard buttons, but actually they're all just regular standard, not clicky buttons, which I like actually. But these are not like a clicky option. These are actually just button covers that you can stick on here if you want this to be B and this to be A. Obviously, being an Xbox style controller, they have to have different shapes of these buttons because they kind of fall off the edge of the controller. That's something I've always hated about the Xbox design, but let's not go there. And you also get these alternative analog sticks, which you can use if you want to have a little more accuracy. Let's say, again, maybe even if you're playing Forza, you might use this, but presumably this is more for FPS shooter games. If you want to have a super tall stick over here for greater degree of accuracy when you're aiming, that could be useful. And it's nice that it comes with 3 different lengths. So you've got the original standard length, you've got the slightly longer length, and you've got this super long one. Alright, so that's pretty much everything for the GuliKit TT Max controller. The main thing about this controller is that it's quite reasonably priced. I think at $70, which was what you're expecting to pay for a standard like DualSense controller without back buttons, you're getting a controller that has 4 back pedals that you can remove if you don't want them. I love that feature, being able to like get rid of back pedals, because especially on my left hand, I don't want to have anything jutting out of the controller since I don't use my left hand for the back buttons. So I like the flexibility of the back buttons, but again, at $70 you're getting back buttons, also this removable D-pad cover, which is nice actually, because I definitely felt like in Under Night In-Birth I preferred to have the actual ridges on here, but then of course the trade-off is that it does hurt your fingers a little bit more. Then there's the fact that it has TMR analog sticks, but also Hall effect triggers. Is it my favorite D-pad for fighting games? Honestly, I had no issues when playing Street Fighter because I don't end up doing that one specific thing in Under Night In-Birth where I have to like go from down forward to down back very, very quickly. When I played Under Night, I was kind of like, this is kind of annoying. It does skip neutral down way too often for me to play Under Night with this. Street Fighter 6, honestly, unless you have a combo that does that, this is not really an issue. It's not designed to be a great fighting game controller, but they do put it in their website that, it's ideal for fighting games because it does come with 2 different D-pads. So they are aware that people might be interested in using it for fighting games, but I wouldn't think of this as a fighting game controller. I would think of this as a $70 controller with 4 back buttons using the Xbox shape, but the PlayStation layout, and TMR sticks and Hall effect triggers. If that is the specific thing that you're looking for, then actually I think you're getting a pretty good deal. I think it's a very versatile controller. It's just not the first one I would choose for fighting games, and also it is a shame that the setup tool doesn't seem to work. I assume this is like one of their newest controllers. I would appreciate if the setup tool was actually available for this, because I want to be able to deactivate certain buttons so that I can actually make it tournament legal. But like I say, this isn't the controller I would choose for fighting games anyway. So hopefully that was all helpful for you. It's the GuliKit TT Max controller. That's all for today. I've been NihongoGamer. I'll see you real soon.